Good morning, folks. So this morning I want to work on my Mikawa Yatsubusa Japanese maple. If you'll recall, these leaves got quite scorched this summer, so I've been excited to get them off. I'm going to do that today. I also want to talk a little bit, this came from a viewer, about whether it's okay to grow other plants at the base of your bonsai trees. So I have a few thoughts about that, so I'll share that as well. So I'll get started. Alright, here I go. Fall is definitely in the air. So some of these I'm gonna they fall off. I've let them stay on for a while. Some of them I'll clip off right at the petiole, I think is the word. But yeah, most of them are just kind of falling off. And I don't know if you really need to do this. And I debated whether I should even film this, but I guess I just kind of wanted to document and share. You know, I've been pretty excited to get these leaves off. And that's one thing I love about deciduous trees as opposed to evergreens is, you know, you screw up one year, you burn your leaves, you have another shot next year. And so I'm excited to have another shot at this tree of having some nice leaves that aren't burned. And so I also wanted to share too, I've seen this quite a bit on YouTube. I've seen it be done successfully, but especially maples, which are often, you know, you get multiple flushes, meaning periods of growth. You can, if you burn your leaves really severely, you can defoliate and then get a new flush of fresh leaves. I did not do that with this tree. I thought about it, but this tree, I don't know whether it's just that it's a pretty established bonsai actually at this point, which feels weird for me to have a tree that I call an established bonsai, because I haven't been doing this long, but I have had this tree in a pot, a bonsai pot, for well over a decade now. I'm like at 11, going on 12 years with this tree. So I don't know whether it's that it's just old and it's slowed down, or if it's just weak in general, it's just not that healthy. I'm not sure. But I basically get one flush of growth with this tree. So if I imagined if I would have defoliated it in, say, like July, I think it would have just not put on more leaves and would have been bare the rest of the year. Which I wonder if that would have been good for the tree. Because even though it was sun scorched pretty severely, you know, the interiors of these leaves were still fine, and I imagine they were still photosynthesizing, producing, you know, food for the tree. So I was really hesitant to take away that, take those leaves from the tree that early in the year. So that's why I just kind of let this tree be. But the trees the leaves are done now for sure. They're changing, they're done. It's not gonna wake up again. And thankfully I'm looking now, and I knew this to be true, and I'll show some close-ups, but it's got all these nice buds on it, set up for next year, I mean. And I think it'll be just fine despite how terrible it was looking the last couple months. So yeah, taking these leaves off, not really necessary. I could just kind of leave them on all winter, and eventually I think most of them would kind of slough off. I have already, you know, they have been falling. And I might do a little bit of slight branch pruning on this, but again, I don't really need to with this tree. I do prune it infrequently, and when I do, it's like, oh, I'll take off that branch, or I'll take off that branch, but it's never like pruning the entire thing, pruning that. It's just like here and there. As I'll show some close-ups of the internodes on this thing, that they're tiny. What I'm also gonna do is clean up the base of this tree a little bit and talk a little bit about, you know, is it okay to grow stuff on the base of your bonsai trees? Alright, so that'll finish that. Here it is. I guess I'll mention too, one reason why I think people do this, they often don't leave the leaves on their deciduous, is first to enjoy the branch structure during the winter, of course. But also, critters can live in these leaves. I actually found, just at the end here, when I was pruning off, I found a live spider. I feel bad I destroyed his home. So critters can live here. Some good, I'm sure some bad though. So that's one reason why you might want to clean up your leaves and also clean up the leaf litter on the base of your bonsai. So now I'll talk about the base of the tree and actually work on that as well. So I'll zoom up to the base here. All right, so now I'm gonna clean up the base of the tree, right where the bark hits the moss. And I'll tell you why I am gonna do this. For the longest time on this tree, I did not do this. And right here, you can see where the tree, and I'll start doing it. So I take just a toothbrush and water, and you can use, I think I've heard people, they use water and vinegar. I just use water. Vinegar would do more. But you can see as I take away some of the growth near the base here, you can see how that's undercut like that. That's what happens if you don't do this. What happens is the moss stays on the bark at the base, and it stays continually damp, and it can kind of like this. There was a root here actually, and so I had a nice like kind of root flare, but it just kind of rotted away, I think. And I'm quite sure this undercut happened because I did not keep this clean. For the longest time with this tree, I just had a lot of this Irish moss, which I will talk about here shortly. Irish moss. Had that growing at the base, that and some moss. And so this is now undercut, and I don't think there's really any getting away from that. It's always going to be that way. So, this is like one of my first trees. So you learn things. That being said, the tree is what it is, and I still love it, and I really don't mind. This is definitely one of a kind Nabari. It's not the most beautiful Nabari by any means, but yeah, you can really see that undercut. But I just kind of get rid of it, and so you can see here, how the moss is growing up on the trunk. You don't want to leave that moss on there very long. It damages the bark at the base. I only do this maybe once a year, really. You can see that the bark of this tree is not the best. It's got this big fat root. And I love the look of the moss growing right up to the tree, and I think that's fine to have that. But then just periodically, you just kind of want to chase it back. I kind of think of it the same way as you can't just let your bonsai grow indefinitely without pruning it, or else it's gonna just it won't become a bonsai anymore. Same thing, you can leave the moss there for long periods of time, but if you don't eventually clean off the trunk will just get swallowed, and it could damage it. So I just give it a good scrub with a toothbrush and water. But yeah, I think it's vinegar. I should have done more research before filming this. I think people sometimes use some water and vinegar because that definitely will kind of kill stuff growing on the base of the tree. Alright, so one last thing I want to do for this tree. I've cleaned off the moss off the base. Is this little plant right here. Most of this is moss. But when I bought this tree, it came with this plant, which is, the common name is Irish moss, or one common name. I think I've also heard it called Scotch moss. That might be a different species. Anyways, even though the common name is moss, it's not a moss. It's some other plant, and I really like it. It has these nice little white flowers, It looks really great. It stays green in the summer. The problem is, I've heard a lot of bad things said about this plant. Is that it's quite aggressive and it has these aggressive roots. And I can say from first-hand experience, it does have pretty aggressive roots. Whereas a moss, this true moss, doesn't really have real roots. To my understanding, it's like, kind of a different life form than a lot of plants. Moss is its own thing. It can become pretty aggressive, and the roots can grow all over your pot. And for a long time, and I'm actually very pleased about what I did about this, because this tree came with a bunch of this moss at the base of it, and the moss has never really left, in a whole decade. It's always there, this Irish moss. And I don't know. I've seen some things where, like, if you see any of this, you need to eradicate it. It'll take over your plant. It's so aggressive. I don't know. This tree has been fine with this moss at the base of it for a decade. At the same time, I wouldn't just, I would never let the whole surface of the bonsai pot become covered in this moss, because I pulled up the roots, and it can become quite prolific. But what I did for this tree in particular this year is I did have a ton of that Irish moss on this last year. And I thought, okay, I'm going to put true moss on this tree, and that's going to compete with this Irish moss. And it did. It did a great job competing with it. It really outcompeted the Irish moss this year. So I have a lot more true moss on this tree now, and a lot less of the Irish moss. So I don't have much of it. So I do... even if I pull up all the little Irish moss that I have on here, I guarantee you there will be more. And I really like it. I like the look, but I do periodically just knock back this Irish moss. I don't think you need to be super alarmed if you have it. You don't have to freak out, but I would not let it get too established in your pots. I would periodically knock it back, which is what I'm doing right now. And really, I found too, I know I have some other plants growing in here, and really I like the look, and I'm about to talk about this more later, or not later, but very shortly here on the video, about how I feel about growing other plants besides moss at the base of your trees. So I guess point number one is some plants you do want to be careful at the base of your trees, Irish moss being one of them. But this forb right here, for instance, I know from experience that this has a root in the plant, in the pot, but it's not super aggressive. I can pull these up anytime. There's just a small root. I don't think it's really competing with my tree too much. So I like the look of these little tiny forbs amongst my moss. And so I let them grow because I like the aesthetic. All right, well that gets most the Irish moss off. So it's mostly just true moss now at this point. So for the second part of this video, I want to talk about growing plants at the base of your bonsai trees and whether that's a good idea or not. I obviously do that, as you can tell from the base of my larch here, one of my favorite trees. I grow a lot of plants at the base of my bonsai often, and that's mainly just because I like the aesthetic. I like the way it looks. So first off, starting with moss, I don't think there's really too many disadvantages to growing moss at the base of your bonsai. I think there are some advantages, really. The big advantage I see with moss is I've just noticed this repotting my plants. When I have a moss layer on my bonsai, the roots can grow in that upper stratum of the soil that normally without the moss it would probably be too dry for them, I imagine, or at least in the summer it would dry out. So I think the moss actually helps maintain the moisture of the upper strata of the soil. So I think I don't know if there's really too many disadvantages to growing moss at the tops of your bonsai. I'm sure there's something, because I've heard that often bonsai get mossed at for shows, and then it gets taken off afterward. And I don't know the reason for that. I just leave moss on my bonsai year round. And I've found using rainwater, my moss, even during the heat of summer, if I water my trees daily during the heat of summer, my moss still stays green. I think when I use my city water, it doesn't work as well. So I don't, and so moss is like, it's different than many plants. It doesn't have these true roots that go down into the soil and possibly compete with your tree. So moss is a totally different thing than other plants. So I won't worry too much about growing moss on your bonsai year round, but again, I don't think they always do that. I think some of those really nice bonsai, they take the moss off the trees. Coming now to these are sedums. I think I have like at least 5 different species of sedum in here now. I've found with sedum, again, repotting my trees, that, yeah, they're not like moss. They have true roots that go down to the soil. So they are competing with the tree. And I think that's the big reason maybe not to do this, is they are competing. They require water. They take some of the fertilization that I put in there. So they are competing with the tree. So yeah, if you're concerned about your tree and you want your tree to get all of the water, all of the nutrients, then maybe you don't want to plant anything else at the base of your trees. So would the tree grow better and be happier without the plants? You know, maybe, you know, probably, but are the plants really causing the tree to suffer? I don't think so. But again, I guess I'll leave it up to viewers too. Maybe there can be some chatter on this video, like, is it okay to plant plants at the base of your trees? I'll also show off, here's that Japanese maple. It's early November right now. Still just looking so good. There's another one with a lot of moss at the base. I have a few different species of moss. And again, I think it really just maintains the moisture in that upper level of the soil. So I don't think there's anything wrong with moss on the tops of your bonsai. I do, if you can't get moss to grow at the top of your trees, I use just dead sphagnum moss, which is what I have at the base of this Chinese elm. And that will kind of do the same thing. The reason why I put it there was, again, to maintain the moisture in the upper level of the soil. So I'll leave it there and show you some of my fall color in my yard. It's looking great.